Good morning, everyone. We are now on Perek Aleph, Mishna Vav. Hamisha lo yitremu. There are 5 people who should not to take truma. They should not be separating the truma. V'im tarmu, but if they did, trumas and truma, the truma that they did will work. So initially, they should not be separating the truma, but if they did it, it works. First example, now, we're going to go through the 5 in a second. It's important to point out that when a Mishnah gives a number, it typically there's a reason for it, and it means to point out these 5 and not something else. If you recall, we had different opinions in the previous Mishnah about a cut and about a minor, whether a minor is able to separate truma. According to some, no minor can separate truma. According to some, any minor can separate truma. According to another, it depended what age they were at. And therefore, what this Mishnah would be saying when it says Chamisha lo yitremu, 5 should not take truma, and that means these 5 and not others, it's to exclude something. It's excluding the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who said that a katan who, although initially should not, no one says a katan and minor should initially separate truma, but Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that if he does it, it works. This Mishnah is coming to disagree with that. At the same time, the number isn't always exact. It's more the fact that there is a number that we see there's something being excluded. But we actually had a 6th example of something that was of a person initially who should not separate truma, but whose truma does work, and that was someone who is deaf but can speak, which means that he was born being able to hear and speak. Later he became deaf. That person who's able to speak is definitely capable. His truma is a good truma, but we say he shouldn't do it because he can't hear the blessing, the bracha that has to be made over it. So again, it's not 5, it can be more than a 5, but it's the fact that the Mishnah says a number that indicates that it's coming to exclude something. All right, so the first example, ha'ilem, a person who is mute, means a person who lost their ability to speak. There is someone, they're not deaf, but they can't speak. They lost the ability to speak. So here, the reason why we say initially they should not separate truma is because if they can't speak, that means they really cannot make the bracha. One who is incapable of speech may not separate truma because he cannot recite the rabbinically instituted blessing. He's not able to recite the blessing. He's not able to recite the blessing, then we don't want to separate truma because we want truma to be separated with a bracha. But again, since a bracha is not ma'akev, a bracha is not something that says without it the mitzvah isn't fulfilled, can't be done after the fact. So this is no worse than a person who separated truma and forgot to make a bracha. It still works. The bracha isn't going to hold back the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Therefore, initially we say that he should not say the bracha. He should not separate truma because he cannot recite the bracha. However, if he does separate the truma without the bracha, it's still going to work. Okay, now there's an interesting thing they bring down here about this person who is mute, and that is, just realize as I'm speaking to you, what if he can mouth the words? He just can't say it out loud. I mean, you're supposed to be, so you should be saying a bracha as you hear it. So again, the fact that even if a person who's mute doesn't mean he cannot mouth words. It means he cannot, no one's going to hear whatever he's mouthing. I always thought a mute person, I'm really sure, never thought about it. There's a mute person who can't even move their mouth, or it just means that they move their mouth, but, they can't make any sound. Not sure what it means, to be honest. Maybe still, if the sound doesn't come out, you don't hear the bracha, and initially you're supposed to hear the bracha, that would also be a reason to say initially not to make the bracha. Not sure. But clearly, we're definitely talking about a person who is mute, who cannot speak at all. Now, initially, what's really possible is this mute person could actually have someone make the bracha for him. He can, many times we do a mitzvah, and someone makes the bracha for us. So clearly, we should be making the bracha on our own. But a person who's mute can't make the bracha. He could always engage someone else to make the bracha for him. And if he couldn't engage someone else to make the bracha for him, that's like he's saying the bracha, Shemei Ka'ina. If you hear someone making a bracha, it's like you're saying it. Now, according to some, if you're not capable of saying, then maybe hearing it from somebody else won't work, because then you can't say listening is like saying, because I'm not even capable of saying. Others disagree with that, and they say, no, it works even if you can't speak. And therefore, according to those, our Mishnah that says the Elam should not do it would mean he should not do it because without someone saying the bracha for him. But if someone would say the bracha for him, according to some, there'd be nothing wrong. Shemeh ka'ina, you hear it's like you're saying it, it should work. Others say even you still should not rely on that, because you could always get someone else, not just to make the bracha, but you can get someone to separate the truma also. Right? You could have someone separate truma for you. So even though, again, it may be better for you to do the mitzvah itself, but when it's a question of being able to have the mitzvah done with the bracha on your account for you, that would be the better way to go. So a couple of different ways of looking at this halacha about the elam, about the person who's mute and not initially not being allowed to separate truma. What is the extent of that? Next, vashikar, the person is drunk. All right, how drunk? So the way it's brought down here, the way that the Bartanur brings down is that our Mishnah refers to one who is so drunk that he's not capable of speaking properly in front of a king. That means the person's drunk that in a situation where he really has to put himself together to speak, he can't do it. And therefore, that is the situation where we say he cannot separate truma. Now, what's the problem with this person? He's not that drunk that he doesn't know what he's doing. The problem is like this, but he's drunk enough that he cannot fulfill a halacha that we want to be done when you separate truma. The Torah wants to separate truma from the best of our crop. It's not mandatory, but it's the way the Torah wants us to do the mitzvah. This person at this stage of being drunk cannot differentiate what's the good, what's the better stuff, what's not as good, what's the best. Can't do it. And therefore, we don't want him separating truma. Of course, though, if he does separate truma, this is not something that is it's not mandatory for the mitzvah. And therefore, even if he can't, if a person separates truma not from his best, it's still good truma. So therefore, if this person does separate truma, we're not going to say that it doesn't work. Next of all, a person who is naked, a person is unclothed, completely, not wearing anything. In that situation, we say that he cannot separate truma because he can't make a bracha. That's halacha. If a person is completely undressed, that person may not make a bracha. And since he may not make the bracha, then we don't want him separating truma. Nonetheless, if he were to separate the truma, it would work because, again, it's no worse than a person separated truma forgot to make a bracha. A bracha doesn't hold back from fulfillment of the mitzvah. So therefore, this person who is arim, this person should not be separating truma because he's not allowed to make the bracha. But if he separated, the truma would work. Okay, and the truth, and just a little more of an extension of this, this extends to any situation where you can't make a bracha. It's also forbidden to recite a blessing where excrement or urine is present. Accordingly, one may not separate truma in such locations. In any kind of state, in any kind of situation, there's waste, and that doesn't allow you to make the bracha. You don't separate truma in that situation. If you did, it would still work. Next example is vahasuma, a person who is blind. Again, the person who is blind is the person who cannot differentiate between the best crop and the choicest crop and the crop that's not as of high quality. Same thing like the shikar. And therefore we say initially, no separating truma, but if it's done, it works. The last example is ubal keri. A bal keri is a person who has a seminal emission from their body. It's a certain type of emission from the body. And that makes a person tamei to the extent that he cannot make a bracha. Now, this is something in Masechta Brachos that's brought down that Ezra HaSofer, Ezra the scribe, had instituted that a person who's a bal keri may not make a bracha. And that is not applicable anymore. That takon of Ezra, that law, that institution of Ezra is not. It doesn't stand anymore. It was basically annulled. But when it was relevant, like in the times of the Mishnah, if a person was a bal keri, they couldn't make a bracha. Well, if you can't make a bracha, then you shouldn't be separating truma. But if you did at the end, it would still work. Okay, so the Mishnah, after listing, let's just read it together. Let's just read it again. Ha'ilem, the mute, v'hashikar, the drunk, v'ha'arem, the person is unclothed, v'hasuma, the blind, v'bal keri, and the person is a bal keri, lo yitremu, they should not separate truma. V'imtarmu, but if they did, truma and truma, their truma still stands. Now, we know that the Mishnah began with that. That was the introduction of the Mishnah. Chamisha lo yitremu v'imtarmu trumas and truma. There are 5 who shouldn't separate, but if they did, it works. So why, again, does the Mishnah repeat, lo yitremu, they should not separate, but if they did, it works? Why the repetition? And the explanation that's given is because the Mishnah wanted to reiterate that this should not be done. Meaning these 5 people might say, well, it works, so it's so bad. So it's about if I separate truma, it's going to work even if I do. Therefore, the Mishnah repeats, lo yitremu. You should not be separating truma. Again, it repeats, but if it works, you do it, it works because it wants to be, it wants to make it clear that, at the end of the day, if it works, it works. But it wants to reiterate this statement because it wants to stress the importance to those people that they should not take it lightly, that they are not permitted, they are not permitted to separate truma because of whatever their situation might be. Okay. Sefer HaMitzvot now. Mitzvahs lo'isasur shel rachim ani badin. Prohibition against having mercy on a poor person in judgment. Shenamars, it says, the daloi sada berivai, a poor man you shall not favor in his case. It also says, do not lift up the face, not respect the person who is poor. What does this mean? The judge should not say, anihu, this person is poor. We should be supporting this person. He needs help. So, the guy who's having a case against him won't be a big loss to him. And let's help this guy have parnas, have a livelihood. As I can have been, the judge will say, therefore, you know what? I'll rule he's right. And like this, we don't have to go around begging. He's claiming he has a right to money. He'll get the money. He'll think it's right, and he'll look that it's right, and we don't have to go around begging. So, with all the good intentions involved, the Torah says you can't do it. A judge has to be truthful, has to give a truthful judgment. This applies in all places at all times. Next mitzvah. Prohibition against a judge perverting justice for a sinner against him in his case. Meaning, you've got this guy who comes to Beis Din. He's a Rasha. He's an evil person. He sins constantly. Why is he coming to Beis Din? I don't know. But he's coming to Beis Din. And the judge says, this guy's a Rasha. I'm not gonna judge in his favor. He doesn't deserve to be judged favorably. He deserves to be roughed up a little bit. The Torah says you can't do that. Do not pervert the judgment of your poor person in his case. Upirish evyaincha, and the interpretation of this word evyaincha, which the base interpretation is the per person, is mishu evin b'mitzvahs. You know why he's poor in this case? He's poor in mitzvahs. He's not doing mitzvahs. He's a sinner. And one might think, he doesn't deserve a proper judgment. The Torah says you're not allowed to do that. The judge is obligated. Okay? This will apply in all places and at all times, both by men and women. Not sure what that means. A woman can't be a judge. So why does he mention it here? Unless it means any kind of involvement in a judgment in which you, pervert the judgment because the person is wicked. Maybe this prohibition even includes, though the Chafetz Chaim didn't speak it out. Maybe it even includes, the litigants. Don't think that you can, cheat out this person because he's a sinner. Either that or it's a printing mistake. Don't know. Okay, let's do one more mitzvah, and that is mitzvah loisaseh aladayin shelahatis mishpat ger v'yaseh. Prohibition on a judge. Must be a printing mistake before. Mitzvah loisaseh aladayin shelahatis mishpat ger v'yaseh. Prohibition against a judge not to pervert the judgment of a convert or a widow. And that means like this. Shenamaz, it says, Leisata mishpat ger yasem. Do not pervert the judgment of a convert or of a orphan. Unfortunately, history shows there have been corrupt judges who take advantage of the weak. And therefore the Torah is specifically putting a prohibition on this. If the judge transgressed and did pervert the judgment of a convert or a orphan, now the person has transgressed actually two prohibitions. One is do not, which will be the next mitzvah that we learn, do not do injustice in judgment, and don't do a wrong judgment, a prohibition for a judge. You have to make correct judgment. If you don't, if you judge it unjustly, it's a prohibition. And here also we have a prohibition of not to pervert the judgment of a convert or of a widow, meaning there's a general prohibition against judging unjustly. And then there's another one, an added prohibition when it's being done against the person who's a convert or a widow or a orphan, due to those people. This applies in all places and at all times. Wish you all a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.